.com ads were gone, replaced by Motorola. I wonder if, if there's some sort of contractual agreement like, hey, if the price of Bitcoin goes under 20,000, we can't foot the bill. We can't be a sponsor of that race.
Yeah, that's it's interesting how some of those contracts are worded sometimes.
Yeah, Motorola's a blast from the past. That was a good race. Are you ready, son?
I'm ready to go.
Hello. Welcome to Hard Compound, an American take on Formula One. We've just finished watching the Italian Grand Prix, Monza. I can't promise you it was an exciting race, but it did happen, and there was some controversy. Patrick, son, can I get your take on the Italian Grand Prix 2022?
Yeah, I mean, a few talking points today, but my take is a safety car finish. Really? We saw last year in Abu Dhabi, end of the year, big old controversy because the race did not end under a safety car. And seemed like the FIA and race officials today seemed to take that into consideration and forced the race to end under a safety car, which to me is shameful. Racing should never end under a safety car. That's it. If it's dry, if it's not dangerous to race, then you absolutely need to finish the race under racing laps, not under a safety car. So that was very disappointing to me. I don't think it would have really changed the outcome of the race. Verstappen was too fast. He was on a brand new set of tires, blah, blah, blah. So I don't think it would have necessarily altered the points allocation like it did at the end of last season. But, I just feel like you can't have that happen. Maybe red flag the race, restart under a safety car, have a rolling start, whatever you want to do. But I really don't believe that this race at Monza, of all places, should end going, 80 kph behind a safety car. That's disappointing to see.
Yeah, nobody wants an F1 race to end under safety car. I mean, there are a lot of angry Lewis Hamilton fans still saying, see, they followed the rules, and that's how it should end. Well, look, last year in Abu Dhabi, Michael Massey was under tremendous pressure by the FIA and by Mercedes and Red Bull to not allow any funny business and not allow the race to end under a safety car. I think that got into his head, and he made some errors, though he did all last season. But nobody wants an F1 race to finish under a safety car. So I'm with you. I'm with all the fans. We were sort of robbed of that, and it was sort of an odd circumstance as well. It seemed to take the track stewards forever to decide, well, are we going to clear out, Ricardo's car? Do we have to bring out an actual safety car? Should we red flag this? And it just goes to show you the immense pressure of managing a race in real time while you're wanting to deliver fairness, entertainment. You're wanting to make everyone there happy. You're wanting to make the millions around the world watching it happy. And you're also absolutely wanting to make things safe as possible. This is an impossible task. And we know they try to get as close to correct as possible. But it was sort of an odd thing. It was disappointing that at the historic Monza track, we finished under a safety car. It's disappointing that it seemed to take them so long before they can figure out if they should bring a crane out and get Ricardo's car out of there. And it was odd watching F1 cars sort of driving around a track while there's a crane there. I had, glimpses of Jules many years ago. So that was an odd one. It does appear that Verstappen has this thing sewn up. Another race, another win. He started at 7th. It doesn't seem to matter much where he starts. not much more to be said about this. I will say one thing. You never forget a Nicholas Latifi Mick Schumacher battle. And we had that for real in Monza. So that was fun. What did you think about the start of the race where we had such grid order chaos? It seemed to take them forever to sort of figure out where everyone should start, which struck me as funny.
Yeah, I mean, just due to all of the grid penalties for power unit components or full power unit changes, we saw a lot of guys starting out of position based on what their car's capability is. And we saw some guys start extremely well, the likes of Verstappen and Carlos Sainz making up tons of places on the opening couple of laps. And eventually the race sort of settled in. But it was a lot of fun to watch, some of those battles happening on track between drivers you normally wouldn't necessarily see together. So it was a fun start to the race. I think it all settled in pretty quickly. You could see the pace difference between the Red Bull and Ferrari versus pretty much everyone else. So ultimately it ended up being kind of just sort of a lazy race almost, which seems weird to say for Monza since it's known as the Temple of Speed. And the last few seasons, we've gotten some pretty chaotic races. But this year, really not a whole lot happening. Some pretty easy passes for Sainz and Verstappen and their teammates, even Lewis Hamilton, just sort of breezing past guys down those long straights. They just have so much better power and aero versus these other teams. And it really sort of fell into this procession where, of course, the top three teams make up all their places and just sort of sit in. And I think, we got the top six were both drivers from Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes, which is kind of what we would expect.
Jacques Villeneuve is one of my favorite analysts, and he's won at Indy, he's won F1, and he really tells it straight. And I always like his candor. And one of the points he made that I thought was interesting, he said they need to get rid of all of these rules about grid penalties, at which they assess on drivers based on if they're getting a new power unit, and there's other portions of the car that they'll get moved back of the pack or lose some spots on the grid for any changes to the car. And he said there's now a spending cap. They should get rid of the very notion of grid penalties for changes to the car and just let them have at it, do whatever they want, because they have to manage based on the spending cap. So if they bring in a new power unit, well, that's going to be a huge hit to the spending cap or chassis or whatever, which I actually thought was a really good idea. I think I have a feeling that it's not just him being insightful, that there's probably discussions of something happening just like that, inside FIA. And so I could see that maybe next year we get rid of some of this silliness about, you have new power units, you go to back of the grid, for example.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit ridiculous because we see, when those top teams go to the back of the grid, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. They don't end up getting bogged down. They just quickly make their way through the field. And frankly, when they do take the penalties, they're on strategic tracks. The tracks that they know they'll easily be able to make up those places. Not a place like Hungary. Obviously, we saw Hamilton last year in Brazil take that penalty. He got a sprint race to make up a bunch of places, and then the actual race where he came all the way back to win, I believe. And you know, it seems kind of the notion of these grid penalties seems sort of misplaced. They don't actually impact the teams like they're supposed to. And I think, it's probably better just to let them spend away up to the cap and, see what happens. If they don't have enough money to put in new power units or new components, then they're kind of screwed. So they have to make a decision there. I think that's a better way to handle it than handing out meaningless grid place penalties.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that was a fairly insightful comment by Villeneuve, and I can see them trying something like that by next year. A big story beyond Max winning and Leclerc and the Ferrari in Italy finishing second and the safety car, the safety car finish. I think the next big story is Nyck De Vries. He hopped in that car. And this is not like when George Russell replaced Lewis Hamilton a couple years ago. George had been driving in Williams for years, and then he jumped into the Mercedes when Lewis Hamilton was ill. Nyck, I think this was his first time ever in an F1 race, right? And maybe it isn't much to beat your teammate when your teammate is Nick Latifi, but he had a stellar race and his first race ever, and in that terrible Williams car. What did you think of that?
Extremely impressive. I think he got called in Saturday morning, so he didn't have a week to prepare. This was a last minute thing. Albon had appendicitis, had to have surgery, and so they rushed to get De Vries in the car so they could run two cars. And he looked a natural in there. He had a great qualifying session, obviously helped out by those grid place penalties for other drivers, but ended up starting in 8th position on the grid, 2 places ahead of his teammate, Nick Latifi. And then just sort of had a really quiet, solid race, ending up in 9th position in a Williams that only Albon has scored in this season, and only in a few races. I think Albon would have done very well on this track. The Williams looked pretty pacey at Monza, but nonetheless, De Vries coming in, dominating his teammate, Nicholas Latifi, with a whole 2 days of prep in an F1 car for the first time. It is extremely impressive. I think this sort of cements the need to drop Latifi from Williams and find a replacement. If that replacement is De Vries, then I think that would be a really fun team, Albon De Vries at Williams. But really awesome to see him just jump in and get right to work.
He did. And, there's nothing much more we can say about Latifi. He's had more than enough chances. He's failed essentially every time. But, that shouldn't take anything away from what De Vries did today. The first time in an F1 race in the Williams, on no notice, the car wasn't set up for him. And he had, like you said, he had a solid race. Such a good race, in fact, that I'm not sure Albon would have done much better. Maybe, but when I look at the final placement there, Alonso had to retire. Once again in a terrible car. That seems to be his fate. He's going to Aston next year, and they had to retire both cars. So I think Alonso will be forever in bad cars. But you look at the final results. I don't know if Albon would have done better. If possibly, because I think in qualifying, De Vries pushed the car a little bit too hard. It wasn't quite sure what it could do. So his qualifying wasn't, 100%, but it was pretty close. So, hey, hats off to him. Would love to see him in Williams next year. Now, Sergio Perez, I don't know. I think we maybe have to give some credence to some of the conspiracy theories. Max is just out racing everyone, not just his teammate Sergio. He's clearly out racing George and Lewis. He's clearly out racing Charles and Carlos. But for the past several weeks, Sergio has just not shown anything. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, well, they're putting all the money into Max's car. They're putting all the changes into Max's car. They're setting it up for Max. The strategy's all for Max." Perhaps because he'll win the championship, but I don't know. I mean, do you think Sergio's just sort of tapering off here late in the season, or they're just not giving him a car that he can compete with?
No, I mean, I think Sergio is just sort of fallen behind a little bit. I think Max is handling that car extremely well, and Red Bull has put out a great car. It's faster than anything else on track by a mile. And the car that Perez has, it is not much different than Max. He's gotten upgrades too. He's been given all the support that he needs, and he really, like you said, in the last few weeks has not really raced all that well. I mean, a sixth place finish from, way back on the grid, pretty good for him. But really couldn't keep pace with Sainz, lost position to Hamilton. He really only beat the guys that he absolutely should have, and didn't put up much of a fight against anybody else. And I think it's hard to say. I mean, he seems like Red Bull's Bottas. It's like he's never going to beat Verstappen, and he's really never going to come close. All he's there to do is pick up more points so the team can ultimately finish top of the table in the Constructors' Championship. And right now he's doing a fine job of that. He's in third place overall in the driver standings, and the team is way, way ahead of second place.
I think it's not what I wanted to happen. Mercedes had such a dominant car in the turbo hybrid era, and giving that second seat to Bottas, who was there simply to make sure, he cleared the path for Lewis. We didn't want to see that. If Mercedes is going to have the dominant car, we want to see two top drivers battling it out head to head, race after race, year after year. We don't want someone who's a distant second. But I think that's what we have. I was hoping that we would not see that. I also think this will be a different era. I mean, we already have 3 highly competitive teams, 6 drivers across Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari that could win without any surprises. So it will never quite be the same, but Red Bull has such a good car that it would be great to see like someone who was challenging Max in there week after week. Yeah, I think you're right. Sergio might be Red Bull's Bottas. Why don't we give our top 5? I'll go first because I want to give number 1 driver of the weekend. My number 1, Nyck De Vries. He had such a great race, such a great qualifying. It's such a good story. He's older, I believe, than Max Verstappen. Finally got his shot, and he made the best of it. So he is definitely my number 1. After that, it's sort of the same old story that's been most of this season. Max Verstappen. another great race. He's just sort of, I hear people say, "Oh, Hakeem Olajuwon was not that good. He never beat Michael Jordan." It's like, look, man, no one's going to beat Michael Jordan. No one's going to beat Max Verstappen. He's always the best. So, so he's my number 2. Charles Leclerc. Everyone wanted him to win. It's Ferrari. It's Italy. He had a car that we thought could keep pace. It wasn't quite enough. He did everything he could. Came in second. Good job. Now, my number 4 is Lando Norris. McLaren has been shockingly mid all season. And, the only real stories of note from McLaren this year have basically been, when will Ricardo get fired and who will replace him? Well, this week they actually showed some pace, and Norris had a good weekend. So he's my number 4. And then finally, Hamilton. It was fun watching him. He was starting near the back. He made his way all the way through. There was a point where I think he passed Gasly and Norris on one turn. That was fun to watch. So he is my number 5. So De Vries, Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris, and Hamilton for me. What do you got for your top 5, son?
Very nice. Mine is a little bit different, but starting out the same. Nyck De Vries, of course. I mean, awesome story. I think it would be hard not to give him driver of the day. Just great weekend, hopping in an F1 car, for competitive laps for the first time. And doing a great job with it. A Williams that had gotten 4 points all season. And he comes in and gets 2 awesome points for the team in 9th place in one race, pushing Nicholas Latifi down to 21st place out of a 20 driver championship, which is pretty insane. Just great weekend from him. He's a Formula F2 and Formula E world champion. So he has talent, and he really put it on display this weekend.
Yep.
Then number 2, I have Carlos Sainz, coming basically all the way from the back of the grid, up to very, very close to podium position. Really, really close to Russell. May have been able to get through him had we not had a safety car finish. That's up for debate, but great drive from him. Just sort of easing his way through the pack, getting through Perez, all those mid-pack drivers. It's not an easy task. The Ferrari looked good, and he looked well in control and very calm. I thought he had a great weekend.
Yep, he did. Ferrari did well this weekend.
Just didn't win overall. Then I have Hamilton, like you said, great drive coming also from back of the pack. He took his time. He didn't get up there right away, but he was calm. He did a great stint on his medium tires. Bided his time and was able to get all the way up into the top 5. Really solid drive from him. You kind of expect nothing less, though, from one of the greats. Then I have Pierre Gasly. That AlphaTauri has been absolute shite this year, and Gasly drove really well. A top 8 finish for him, holding off guys pretty much all race. I feel like that's probably his best drive this season. He has not had a good season. That AlphaTauri has been bad, and he drove the wheels off of it today. I felt
he did. He had been sick all week. There was even some rumors that he might not drive, and that was like you said. They've had a shockingly poor season, inexplicably bad. and that was a good race. I had considered putting him in my top 5. He was just edged out. So that's awesome. So you have De Vries, Sainz, Hamilton, and Gasly, and then who in 5th?
And then my last guy, maybe this is just sort of, I don't know. I'll just say my 5th driver of the day is Daniel Ricciardo. I think he did great in qualifying after a really, really poor weekend last weekend, and then raced really well. He was holding guys off the entire race, was driving quick, looked calm and confident in that car for pretty much the first time, it seemed like, this season. And then through no fault of his own, that came to a screeching halt, had to retire the car. Really unfortunate. But, he was up in the top 6 or 7, I think, when it happened. For a McLaren that has not been driving well, this is a good track for Ricardo. It seems like he won last year and was driving really well this weekend. Just had an unfortunate reliability issue.
Yeah, that would have been nice to see Ricardo up there one last time, and on the podium especially. Okay, now, so Max was Max, Charles, and George, and I think we should get used to seeing that on the podium for many races, many years to come. Who do you have on the virtual podium, Patrick?
Yeah, that's got to be like one of the youngest podiums ever. Those guys are all like under 23 or 24, I think.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah, there's a few things I think this weekend that stand out that could be on the virtual podium. I think one for me, going along with one of the top storylines this weekend is Williams. They put out a really solid car, got a really solid driver to replace Albon, and got some great points. I think they proved themselves well this weekend, and I hope that is a sign of things to come in the future, that they're sort of finally maybe figuring it out again, and hopefully we will see a Williams back in the top 10 consistently in the near future.
I can't go along with that one. As long as Latifi remains with Williams, I cannot take that team seriously. He's had far too many races, too many chances. He's been there too many years. The team principal has said, "Oh no, he's we think he's doing a great job." They've even suggested he'll be back next year. I assume that's a lie. I assume it's sort of the way Zach Brown was saying nice things about Daniel Ricciardo while at the same time signing, multiple other drivers and having plans to fire him. If Williams keeps Latifi, they're not a serious team. I love the Williams story. The sort of the global growth and corporatization of F1. There are a lot of upsides to it. I think it's more inclusive now. I think we're going to start seeing younger, better drivers. I think 10 years from now, Max Verstappen won't be the best ever. It'll be some new young driver. We're also getting rid of, I think, just the very notion of daddy drivers anymore will go away as F1 continues to sort of corporatize and go global. But we love those old romantic stories, the old days of F1. We love the notion of a team, of a Frank Williams who can just hustle his way into building an F1 car and then hustle his way into getting on an F1 track and then miraculously win races and then win championships. I don't think any of us believe that's realistic anymore. even an Andretti with $200 million can't get into F1. It has to be a Porsche, for example. And even them, it has to be with Red Bull and with Volkswagen money backing them up. So there's a lot of downsides to the growth of F1, and then it sort of puts an end, I think, to some of those romantic stories of a Williams, of a Frank Williams sort of coming in and putting a team together. But I got to say, as long as Nicholas Latifi is on Williams, I cannot take them seriously. So I know you have them on your virtual podium. For me, I just cannot do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm operating under the assumption that he will be gone at the end of this season. If they don't, then get rid of him. Then I mean, they really should not be in F1 anymore. They're making too many obviously bad decisions. But currently, grabbing Nyck De Vries and putting him in the car and showing everybody, including themselves, that he's capable, and far more capable than Latifi. I'm going to go ahead and believe, or maybe just hope, that someone other than Latifi is operating a Williams next season.
Yeah, I think there's just so much money in F1 now that having, your dad fund your way in is just not going to cut it anymore. For me, on the virtual podium, it has to be that Ferrari yellow. It looks so good, and I felt bad for all the young ladies when Charles Leclerc gets out. Here he is, the handsome young F1 driver in that Ferrari yellow, speaking in Italian, and I'm thinking, man, they are just swooning over this guy, and it's not going to happen. So for me, Ferrari yellow is my gets on the virtual podium this week.
That's funny. I also had that on my virtual podium, but in addition, somebody made a meme about, one time Leclerc wore like a banana suit, and they made a meme like that Ferrari peeled the banana because when he unzips his yellow track suit, it looks like a peeled banana. Anyways.
All right, let's switch to the soft compound. Seb Vettel. Poor qualifying, although I think his car had a lot to do with it. DNF car. Once again, that Aston Martin, I don't know what they're doing over there. It was shite. He has only 6 more races. A stellar career, only 6 more races, and I believe none are in Europe. The rest of the year is Asia and the Americas. I don't know. It's kind of sad, don't you think? I mean, it's time. I think he made the right decision, but it's a little sad, a little bittersweet.
It is a little sad. I mean, he's been a staple of the sport for a long time. I think newer F1 fans maybe don't realize how good he was. He won 4 world championships in a row in that Red Bull, beating prime Alonso, stellar Lewis Hamilton, who had already won a world championship in a McLaren, outracing, Mark Webber, his teammate, and all these other incredible drivers. He is and was a great driver for a long time, and it is a little bit sad, that his era is coming to an end. But I think he's, I definitely recognize that he's at the end of his career, and he's with a poor team, and he's not going to go to a better team, and he just has decided that that's that, and I think that's the right decision for him.
Yeah, he had a superior car to Alonso, but there were a couple years where Alonso just pushed him to the very end. I don't think even Lewis Hamilton or any of the other all-time greats could have consistently have pushed Vettel to the very end, race after race for at least a couple years. Alonso could have had like a third championship, for example, but that Red Bull was just too good. And that's not to take anything away from Vettel, but Alonso clearly made him a better driver because he forced him. It's like, yeah, you may have the car, I'm not going to let you win. He made Vettel better. But Vettel is, a four-time world champion, just a phenomenal driver, and it will be sad to see him go a little bit. So that brings us back to Alonso and to Hamilton as well. Both are signed. I think Alonso for at least 2 more years, Hamilton for at least 1 more year. How many more years do you think they'll be in F1?
That is a good question. I think Alonso can't be more than 2. He's over 40. He's been racing for a long time. Maybe that's one that we should have put on our virtual podium. He tied Kimi Räikkönen for the most race starts of all time this weekend. That's pretty amazing. 349 race starts.
Yeah, and his 2 years off, there was no rest and relaxation. And he was doing Le Mans, Indy, he was racing everything. So that's impressive as well.
Yeah, but he's going to an Aston Martin team that has not looked good for the last couple of seasons. Lance Stroll is going to be his teammate, whose father owns the team and will likely push for Stroll to get all of the good treatment. So I just don't see Alonso with his fiery temper and sort of will to push everybody to stick around for more than a couple seasons. Hamilton, he's kind of got it made with Mercedes. But they did bring in George Russell, a guy that's going to push him every step of the way. Mercedes is not the top of the ladder anymore. They've been pushed back to 3rd currently. And have not won a race all season. I said that if Hamilton did not win the championship this year, that he would retire this year. It seems like that's probably not going to happen, but I think he probably won't want to race too much longer in a car that isn't going to win. I just can't see that happening. So I think maybe for him also a couple of seasons if Mercedes doesn't get back up to the top again.
Yeah, Mercedes has improved. They've had the superior reliability all year. They have improved that car, and they are working furiously to make it better for next year. They are just out of 2nd place, which means a team just out of 2nd place that's working furiously to improve the car for next year is a real threat. I was with you in that I don't think Lewis Hamilton would continue, even though he has a great situation there, if he had a car that couldn't win. What I hadn't counted on was George Russell, because I think by next year, that Mercedes can win. But I think George Russell will be the better driver. It's 2022, George's first year with the team. He has more podiums. He has more points. I did not expect that, and I don't think anyone expected that. He's only going to get better, and I think Lewis will lose a bit. So I'm with you. I can't see Alonso in more than about 2 years. I just don't think physically you can keep up those demands. And for Lewis, I think he's not going to want to get shown up by a teammate consistently. And I think within 2 years, George Russell will be doing that. Yeah. Okay, time to ask the stewards. Is there despite Liberty Media's current ownership of F1, anti-American bias in the sport. I will go through some recent examples. They came out with a 2023 schedule, and there are only 3 races in America. Now, my British and European friends can howl at that, saying, well, there's only one in Britain, there's only one in Italy, there's none in Germany. And I say, look at a map. We are much bigger and have a larger population and a bigger economy. If Europe can handle well more than 3 races, and they do, so can America. What do you have? What are your thoughts on that?
My only real thoughts on that are that there's really there are 3 races currently in the States, and I don't know where you would put any more that would be all that interesting or exciting to people. That's really my only thought on that. I'm not sure that there's any anti-American bias. I don't know. I think adding the two races in the last 2 years to the schedule is a good step toward improving the view of American racing. I think the big thing, rather than just the number of races, is drivers and teams in F1, American drivers and teams. There's very little chance for American drivers to sort of make their way into F1 unless, as a young driver, they go overseas to race in Europe. It's really hard for them to get into F1 otherwise. And I think that's really the issue.
Well, what about the Colton Herta issue? You explained super license points in last week's episode. He's the young American driver, Indy driver, very experienced winner. Red Bull has suggested they are happy to put him in the AlphaTauri seat if Pierre Gasly were to leave. And FIA says, oh, but he doesn't have enough super license points. Meanwhile, Nikita Mazepin has enough super license points. Nicholas Latifi has enough super license points. Lance Stroll has enough super license points. He is clearly at least their equal, if not better.
Yeah, I think the issue with the super license points, I think it's a good idea, but they don't give enough credit to like Indy. They actually give more points per sort of championship position to F2 than they do to Indy. Meanwhile, if you look at F2, those drivers are what, 18, 19? IndyCar has guys who are professional drivers for decades. It's not as easy to win in Indy as it is in F2. I'm sorry, it's not. And you're giving preferential treatment to F2. I think that's where they need to reevaluate how many points they dole out to Indy drivers, because Colton Herta has done a really fine job in IndyCar, and driving against guys who have raced in that series for years and years. And he's a few points away from that 40 point super license points necessary to race in F1. I agree with you that it's kind of ridiculous for the FIA to sort of shoot him down based on super license points. We went over this a little bit last week, but I think it's an understandable sort of rule, and I think it makes sense to try to curb these daddy drivers or what have you. you need to make sure that you're giving out points appropriately. And I think currently they're not doing that.
Across the line, that is our segment where we predict the top 5 for the next race. The next race is in Singapore. We haven't had a race there since before COVID. Alex Albon was a Red Bull driver back then. So, and across the line, we predict who our top 5 will be for the race. If we are correct and a driver we select is in the top 5, we get 1 point. If he is in the exact spot we predicted, we get 3 points. Patrick, what are the current standings for across the line?
Well, the current standings after today, Italy, you are sitting on 68 points to my 56. So 12 points is the difference. 12
points, 6 races to go. That is still a race. Nice. Max is, I believe, 126 up, if my math is correct, which means with 6 races to go, if he wins Singapore, it would put it out of reach. I don't believe Leclerc could catch him. Although that's amazing when you think about it. 6 races still to go. He's up 126. He had 2 DNFs early in the season. These cars are so much more competitive than the previous era. That's pretty amazing. But let's get to it. Who goes first? Me or you?
You go first.
Nice. Well, after talking up Max Verstappen, I will have to choose Max for number 1 in Singapore.
Shoot. That's like the obvious choice, of course. He's won the last, I don't even know how many races at this point.
Well,
Red Bull looks unstoppable, so.
He's won 11. There are 6 races to go. Vettel and I think Schumacher hold the record for 13. 13 wins in a season. That would mean for him to tie, he would need 2 more wins out of 6 remaining races and 3 wins out of 6 remaining races to have the record. That's, I don't know. We're seeing kind of one of those once a generation seasons in Max Verstappen. So,
yeah, that's pretty amazing. But it's also been it's been 2 months since anybody other than Verstappen has won a race.
Yeah.
He's won the last 5.
Cars.
He's won the last 5 in a row. 11 on the season. He's just been unstoppable. I mean, Red Bull has won all but 4 races this season. Ferrari's won the other 4. I mean, it's just been a Red Bull domination this season. It's been pretty impressive.
It has.
So yes, Verstappen, the obvious choice, and definitely a good one. For me, though, I think there have only been 3 other drivers that have won a race this season, so I'll take one of them. And I said I wasn't going to take Ferraris anymore, so I'll have to take Sergio Perez.
Wow. That would be nice. Good for Sergio if he could come back.
Yeah.
He's sort of been the forgotten man.
I mean, yeah, the Red Bull has been dominant. If Max doesn't win, it seems like the other Red Bull would have to win. Ferrari is the only other team that's won. So I guess for my second place, I'll take Leclerc.
Nice. For me, my number 2 would be, I'm going to take Russell. He's just been driving so well. Mercedes keeps getting closer and closer. So I'm going to go Russell, my number 2. And I'm going to leap over Hamilton and Sainz and take Lando Norris for number 3.
Oh, very interesting. Not a bad pick, though. He's been driving lights out. He's best of the rest by a pretty significant margin, too.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying these podiums where it's 3 different teams. That's fun. And that's what I've got so far.
For sure.
Yep.
I think since he's still on the board, I'll have to take Hamilton. Had a great drive today. I expect him to do very well in the next race as well. Let's see, for 4, that's an interesting quandary. I think that I will go with an Alpine, and I think we'll see how Alonso does. I'll take Fernando, P4.
Wow. All right. Well, my 4th and 5th, I am not sure why AlphaTauri has been so god-awful all year, but Gasly was in the points this year. I'm going to take Gasly, my number 4. And 5th, I am going to take... let's see. You took Alonso. I will take Ocon. Could be a wild one.
Nice.
So I have 5 different teams. Yeah.
I think since he's still on the board and he's 5th overall in the standings, he's driving well in the Ferrari, I'll take Carlos Sainz.
Nice. So you have Sergio Perez, a shocking win if it happens. Charles Leclerc, once again, number 2. Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, and Carlos Sainz. I have the man, Max Verstappen, followed by the other man, George Russell. Then Lando Norris, Pierre Gasly, and Esteban Ocon. Excellent. Any crazy predictions, son, for Singapore or the rest of the season?
Well, that is a good question. Singapore is one of my favorite races. It's always cool under the lights. I believe that we will get multiple red flags next race.
Ooh. Nice. We'll see. We'll see. It's under the lights, correct? Because Singapore gets so hot, they always run it under the lights. Interesting. I have what I think is a very good, crazy prediction. Max has 11 wins this season. The record is 13. For him to break that record is 14. That means out of the 6 remaining races, he will need to win 3. Mercedes has yet to win a race this year. I am going to say Max gets to 14 and Mercedes gets 2.
Oh, wow.
I told you that was a good one. And I just thought of that.
Mercedes gets 2 wins. I was going to ask you if you thought Mercedes would get any wins this season. It seems almost impossible that Mercedes would not get any wins in an entire season. But with just 6 races left, who knows?
I mean, credit to Red Bull and Ferrari with these new regulations. Mercedes, as always, been the most reliable, but they're clawing at second place, but it's no guarantee. And for them to be in 3rd, if they finish the season as they are now and not get any wins, that is shocking. All right, I want to remind our listeners, send your questions or comments to heartcompoundpod@gmail.com. We may read them on the show. We definitely will read them. And I also wish to thank you for listening to everybody's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. And we are lights out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
Awesome. Good show, son. Good show. Yeah. We may have been a little too hard on Nicholas Latifi, but the man's a multimillionaire F1 driver. He can take it.
I don't think. I think it's pretty easy to blow everything off when you kind of have it made, so to speak. I mean,